We tend to think of reading and writing as being two aspects of essentially the same skill. Reading means to recognize and interpret language that has been written. Writing means to plan and produce language so that someone else can read it. In fact, there is no necessary link between being able to read and being able to write. People who are good readers aren't necessarily good writers. Children's knowledge of reading doesn't automatically transfer to spelling. If it did, then they should be able to spell the same words that they can read. But this is not necessarily the case. It is common for children to be able to read much better than they can spell. From a linguistic perspective, the difference between writing and reading is the difference between production and comprehension, the ability to produce language versus the ability to understand it. In language in general, not just in reading and writing, but in spoken language as well, there is typically an imbalance between production and comprehension. If you've ever tried to learn a foreign language, you probably know that there is a significant difference between being able to understand what people say to you and being able to say things yourself. It's the same in children's language acquisition. Comprehension is generally ahead of production, meaning that children understand more language than they are able to produce themselves. From a literacy perspective, reading is comprehension while writing is production. Because of this, there are a number of issues which affect the ability to write, but not the ability to read. Firstly, writing requires motor coordination skills such as the ability to hold a pen or pencil and use it to form letters on paper, or the ability to hit the right keys on a keyboard or screen. These are fine-tuned skills, and it takes a long time to develop them to a level where they can be used effortlessly in producing writing. When learning to read, you do not need to develop these skills, and this is one reason why the ability to read typically develops ahead of the ability to write. But just as important is the fact that if you're going to write something that others are actually able to read, you need to be able to plan and construct a text in a coherent way. The reason why this is more of an issue when we write than when we speak is that speaking allows us to rely on context to a much greater extent. We normally know the person we're speaking to, which means that we can make assumptions about what they already know about the topic we're talking about. The context of the conversation gives us clues about which topics are directly relevant at any given time. We can use cues like intonation and body language to help get our meaning across. And if the person we're speaking to doesn't understand, they can ask for clarification. When we write, none of these are options. This means that we have to think ahead in planning which information we have to include in order for our text to be understandable. We have to think about who is likely to read it and how they will interpret what we write. And we are likely to have to include more explicit information than we would if we were just having a face-to-face conversation. So a written text has to be carefully planned and constructed, whereas reading, understanding a text that someone else has written, doesn't require these kinds of skills. Spelling is a skill that requires an awareness of the structure of words as well as a good visual memory. This is because, with so many different ways of spelling the same sounds in English, the various exceptions to the regular patterns have to be memorized. If you're going to write the sound oo, should you spell it with an O, as in lose, with a double O, as in loose, or OUGH, as in through? You may be able to recognize that all these spellings can stand for the same word when you're reading, but when you're writing, you have to make a choice between them. You also have to put in all the letters in the word, whereas when you're reading, you may be able to recognize a few letters and then guess at what the word is. For all these reasons, we can generally expect children's ability to read to be ahead of their ability to write.